Everybody? Is this mic working? Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. I promise you we're going to be ending today strong. This is going to be a really powerful session as we lead into the activities for the rest of the day of Black Men Excel. Again, I encourage you to choose either going to Top Golf. And I was just told there's drinks, there's going to be a bar in the expo hall, but I'm told there's going to be some at Top Golf too. So again, for those of you who like to get lubricated a little bit, you got options. But we do encourage you, again, this is not just about going to sessions. The magic of Black Men Excel, just like the Women of Power Summit, happens in between sessions. It happens after sessions, and we get to know one another, build those bonds that will carry us through till the next time we're all together. So we really want you to, as my old coach used to say, run through the tape. We're coming down the home stretch. Let's put on an extra burst of energy on our own behalf and pouring into each other as we finish out the day. With that said, this is an incredibly important session because we know once upon a time when you had a panel about opportunities in tech, you were talking about tech companies. But now every company is a tech company. And if you're talking about moving the economy, getting in positions of power and influence, gaining opportunities, we have to get men in positions of influence, responsibility at higher levels in the tech industry. And of course, we have to get more Black men, and we're not talking about waiting until they're men, but even when they're boys, on the track to get into tech. And so this session is about both of those things. How do we get more of us into the industry starting a lot earlier, capturing young men a lot earlier, including those who don't necessarily have to go to get a college degree or a traditional college degree to get into the industry. It's a good time for that. But also, once we're in those industries, how do we rise to positions of influence and authority to help drive profitability and success and policy in the industry? We didn't get into it deep in our moderator call. When we talk about policies like how do we responsibly apply artificial intelligence in a way that does not negatively affect Black communities and Black people. So there's a reason why we need brothers like these brothers you're going to hear from today in positions of authority, influence, power, and leadership in the tech industry. So without further ado, let me introduce who we have, you'll hear from today. Probably not in order of their seating, because I just told them to go sit down. But anyway, Rob Duhart, Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at Walmart. Round of applause for Rob. Hayden Leacock, VP Group Functions Technology Development Services, Manulife. Lincoln Roach, Vice President, Software Engineering, Fidelity Investments. Daryl Hammett, GM Global Demand and General and Ops, AWS Lead Management. And before I introduce our moderator, note that most of those companies 10 years ago, nobody would have thought of as tech companies.
That's right, absolutely.
And finally, we have a great moderator, DMV Digital Coach Google, Johnny Bailey.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Let's go. All right, good afternoon. Welcome. So welcome to another amazing, valuable session with Black Men Excel presented by Black Enterprise. Super excited to be here. The introductions have been made. We have a very distinguished panel of Black men in tech. So let's get started. To my estimations, I feel that tech is a fast track for skill building, wealth building, and designing an equitable future for all. Yet the data shows that there's huge underrepresentation in the tech industry since the 1970s, which essentially is the outset. There's also a survey from Silicon Valley Bank that shows that less than 1% of venture capital funds go to Black startups, and Black employees make up less than 5% of the big tech workforce. So the question that I have is, how would you describe the state of opportunities for Black men that want to get into tech or advance in the tech industry today? And I'll start with Rob.
Yeah, I love the question, and thank you, Johnny, for moderating this. Look, I often tell people that I think we are in, everyone knows the Great Migrations. My family came up from Florida to New York City during the second Great Migration. I think we're in the third great migration, and it's driven by tech. In terms of wealth creation, you will never find a vehicle as strong for the Black community as tech. Like, I grew up not far from here, hometown kid, and there's an echelon of people who've been successful leaving the neighborhood, right? And there's athletes, and there's musicians, and probably somewhere in the, either in between there or maybe even above there in some cases, are tech people.
Right.
And I didn't know that growing up, and I'm not sure how many of these young people at OHHS or at Suitland or at Friendly or at Eastern understand that as well. And the question is, some of us may be government contractors, right? Some of us may have been in the military and be working for the government as govies. How do you transition into what I call the seven-figure club in the tech space? And how do you open those doors? And who's opening those doors for you? So I think there's a tremendous opportunity in tech. And I think even within tech, we don't understand the opportunities in front of us. When I talk to govies, I often hear, well, you know, I'd like to get out and make such and such. And I have to tell them, with your skill set, you should be thinking about a lot more. And I didn't know that when I left the government. I had to learn that the hard way. So I think the opportunity is there. Many of us have to continue to send the elevator back down. And maybe even invite people that are where we are to get on the elevator. Because it's not that they're below us. They just haven't gotten on the elevator yet.
Yeah. All right. Hayden, you want to jump on that? What do you feel the state of opportunity is?
We, unfortunately, for me anyways, I think that, you know, with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all those people who had to suffer or sacrifice for us, they put a spotlight on Black people. The value that we can bring to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The value that we can bring to an organization, to a corporation. And so I think the opportunities today is that they're watching us, they're looking for us, right? They're actually looking in places that they never used to look before to look for Black talent. And I think that's the opportunities that now we should be prepared, and we are. There's some amazing Black technical people out there that were never uncovered before, that now they have that opportunity to go look for those things, to look for those jobs, like you're saying, to find the wealth, right? And so that's what I think, to add to what you said, that's where I think the opportunities are.
Daryl, why is working in tech so important, specifically for Black men?
I think so important. I think is relative, right? To what's driving, where your passions are, and I think that as you look back on it, I had a startup. We sold our startup to $1 billion publicly traded company right before COVID. It was we were one of the small 1% that gets to sell their startup after 10 years. And it was hard work, and it's a lot of opportunity. But what I'll say to people is, tell me where you're putting your money and investing your time, and I'll tell you that's where your passion is. And if you're in athletics, and I think this is where we have to think about African American men and how we are investing in them. We put a lot of focus on athletics. We put a lot of focus on basketball or football, but we don't necessarily put as much effort and passion as parents and mentors and coaches into truly what is going to make a difference and what is the margin of difference for you as you get older. I worked 100 hours a week, literally, in my startup. When coffee needed to be made, I made coffee. When trash needed to be taken out, I did that trash. When payroll could not be met and my mother had cancer and my dad passed away and I had to fly from Memphis to get to the bank at 4:59 to put it on my credit card to make payroll to pay my people and I didn't get paid, that is not just tech. That is all about survival. And I think that as we teach our kids and we role model for them as parents, when you think about how you're going to survive in the new world, in the new era, in the new phase of life, technology is our life. And I just left Dallas. I have a large team. I have machine learning, data scientists, economists, you name it. We build algorithms and things of that nature for our organization at AWS, which I love, by the way. after I sold my company, I was going to retire. And they said, hey, please come work with us. They've given me everything I could have ever wanted. And what I do is I invest in minorities. And so I want minorities on my team, but not just minority or men, I want women too, because I think women in tech is just as important. And so at this machine learning conference in Dallas just 2 days ago, just down there with my team, brought them all in, and we did the machine learning conference for Amazon. It was a beautiful thing to see all of these people together, but I would have loved to have seen more people of color in there and bringing them in. And I brought one. I hired a person right out of the fulfillment center to bring him in to teach him tech, because I believe we have to make and set a good example for our people. So I think the opportunities are endless, but we have to model the way and start early, as much as we do about football, as much as we do about basketball, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But what is going to be the margin of your difference? What's the margin of difference for you when you finish high school, when you finish college? How are you going to compete? What's the world going to look like? How are you going to make money? Because Fidelity is my best friend. Because when we sold, I went right there.
We got you. We'll take it.
And the future of work is changing, right? So the nature of education has to change. How we apply ourselves has to be more intentional to where the future is directing us, right? So Lincoln, tell us really quickly, weigh in on your take on the state of opportunity for Black men, or what are the barriers? You know, maybe add that caveat in there as well.
Well, I'm going to take you through my experience and help you realize that this is the most amazing time to be in tech.
Totally.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So when I started, everything you had to learn was either from school or in a book. So you have to go to library, read the book. All online today. I spent $2,500 on my first machine, $5,000 on my second machine. I was working for IBM. But in terms of compute resources, right, that's spend your own money. They would give me the software, but not the compute resources. Amazon, you spend $5 a month. Your first year, actually, when you first sign up, most of it's free.
Yeah.
So this data science stuff that you're talking about, you use Udemy to actually train you online, self-taught, at your own pace. Where do you get the compute? From the cloud, from Amazon. So the bar of entry in terms of just self-motivated individuals has dropped tremendously. That's the only gap now, is your interest, your motivation.
That's true.
Be up at 2 o'clock, like I was, and learn it, and do it. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity, and you can more than take care of a family, right? I mean,
and
have Fidelity take care of your money.
I know.
The demand is growing for roles and talent in tech, right? And so, as you said, there's the YouTube, there's the Udemy, there's all these training, educational resources that are available. It sounds like the barrier is really just pure initiative, right?
Right.
Pure
Drive.
access, awareness, drive, right?
Yes.
Attending conferences like this to hear, like, hey, you have permission. Hey, go do it. Hey, now is the time. There's really never been a bad time to be in technology. If you go back to the 1970s to now, everyone's gotten big, fat, rich, right? So this is also a good time to get in. But I think about the culture and the environment once we get in. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because working in a homogeneously white space, you quickly notice that people don't look like you, they don't talk like you, and they don't have the same lived experience as you. So from where you all sit, what's one word that you would use to describe working in the tech industry, and why? And let's start here with Lincoln and work down.
One word that would describe working in the tech industry. That's a bit of a change from the. So I would say fortunate. I was a computer science student, but I actually started as an accountant, learning macroeconomics and so on. Then took a Fortran class, and was better at Fortran than the economics, and switched majors.
We're talking code language now.
That's a skill.
That's out of date, by the way.
Just out of date.
That's not
So ages me, right? Ages me, but that was
They're still running.
that was the reason for the switch, right?
On-prem, right?
This is what you call nerding out, by the way.
Nerding out. So a language, I was better at that language than the economics. So the word is certainly very fortunate, because I accidentally, made that switch
Yeah.
into this field. And, it's been beyond my expectations. Not that there aren't challenges,
Yeah.
but talking to that 21-year-old coming out of college, and where I am now, what he thought was possible is very different than what I realized.
Daryl, one word to describe working in the tech industry as a black man and why?
Anti-gravitational.
Explain that.
The sky's the limit. I'm a double HBCU grad.
Nice.
Congratulations.
And so I had very humble beginnings. I thought I was going to go to school to be a principal. I remember when working on my master's and working in Fayette, Mississippi, when the walls were falling down, the kids didn't have books, and I was doing my practicum experience for my master's, and I thought I was going to go to school to be a principal because that's all that is what the expectation was. But lo and behold, through the blessing of being aware and growing and going into the Navy for 8 years and seeing a different part of the world and moving up at 30 years old, I was running a $15 billion business for Luxottica Retail. If you guys know the lens crafters and all that good stuff, I had a very good mentor who did not look like me. And wasn't the same color as me, but he took me under his wing. And at 30 years old, I was running a $15 billion business, and I started to learn what ran the business, like SAP and enterprise and software and the technology and the point of purchases and things like that. Oh man, this is good. And so when I retired there at 42, 43, I invested in the startup because I said, this is the future. Because at that time, stuff was coming out like YouTube and things were coming out called machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I said, this is the next wave. And we built our startup and we sold it. But for me, it was anti-gravitational because there is no ceiling. And I have gone further than I ever could have dreamed. I ran a due diligence for our company to be sold with no experience on how to do due diligence. And let me tell you, due diligence and selling to a publicly traded company, by yourself, I was the CFO, GM, COO, HR, marketing, CMO, because we couldn't afford none of those roles, but somebody had to do it. So anti-gravitational, because I've learned all of those jobs that I did in my startup, including technology, has afforded me the opportunity to run this big global team at AWS. So the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Hayden.
My word, it took me a little while to get here.
We talked about it.
is rewarding. And because, listen, from the time I knew I wanted to be in computers, someone was telling me I shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? My high school teacher, like we had to, I want to geek out a little bit. So the first computer that I ever played with was on a Commodore PET, right? And it was playing the block game that to break out. And I loved it. And then we got into systems, and so I told my systems teacher, I want to do this for a living. He looks at me and says, you should get a trade. He just completely, and you know what persuasion he was, and so but I didn't listen to him. I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. So I enrolled in college, and I took a programming course. First job out of college was RPG, geeking out again. And so at every step, though, there was somebody saying you shouldn't, you can't, and I overcame that. And so I went out. I have the blessed opportunity of having to travel all over the world. I've been to China, I've been to Europe. I want to go to Japan. Like I've been to different places. I've been all over the U.S., all because of my job in IT. And so you talk about SAP. I've had the ability to implement. I actually implemented the first PC-based SAP installation in Canada.
Wow.
Right. And so
that wasn't easy.
Right.
Wow.
And so
No
that's the kind of stuff that I look back and I say it's rewarding. I was able to do a lot because of IT. So.
Last but not least, Rob. And then I'm going to flip this question, but I'm going to let Rob go first, and then
I'll keep it fast.
Okay.
This is a hard one for me too. This was actually more directed at the crowd. I'd use the word tribe.
Tribe?
Tribe.
Okay.
Right?
Like
because I was talking to a brother by the name of Charles Nuatu at Netflix. And I realized that there have been so many people who invested in my success that have been a part of my tribe. Some that look like us and some that don't. Some that were, black men or women, some that weren't. But at some point they saw something that I didn't and that society didn't either.
Yeah.
And the tribe is what got me through. Some of my tribe is sitting right here, and I'm grateful for that. So the tribe will get you through what you may not be able to get through on your own.
So I have to ask this question because I'm sure there's a lot of folks here that are either in the tech space, entering, or interested in entering into the tech space, and it's not all peaches and roses, right? And everything that we set up here was fortunate, rewarding, tribe, anti-gravitational, all that sounds amazing. But what about the inability to show up as your most authentic self at times? What about the microaggressions? What about the code switching? How do you guys navigate that? Have you experienced that, and what do you do? And this happens in all, industries, obviously. But how are you guys navigating that as Black men? Because that's really important.
So if I can frame what I've come to learn and do is because, like a lot of us, you start to get that drive and you want to know this, so there's a passion that follows it. You recognize that they expect little of you, and so you seek to excel and truly know what it is that you're doing. That became the floor, but it's also, I'll talk about things how that can be weaponized against you. But in terms of knowing what it is, knowing your craft, I think is fundamentally just the base requirement.
Yeah.
And then I would say, I would share this model with you that in terms of navigating the environment. When you're in a situation and you feel like it's because of your skin color, I'd say make sure you exhaust all the other potential motivations people have for that before saying, I think that's what it is. And it usually shows itself in that logic totally fails, right? And so that's what hints at you that this is something else. And in that way, you're not always on defense mode, but now you can target strategies and techniques towards individuals or groups that, in your organization, you feel aren't necessarily as open to you as you would like.
Any other philosophies for navigating this environment?
Yeah, I would say that based on my experiences, to be very candid, we face it all day, every day. Yeah. But it's how you choose to respond. And that's what I've learned the most, is how you choose to respond says a lot about you, but also says a lot about what you want from the relationship with others. Because what I found in some of the rooms, it's like being in this machine learning and ethics conference this past week. One of the challenges, as we all know, geeking out, machine learning is based on data going in, right? Data goes in, drives machines to learn. When we talk about inherent biases that are in machine learning, it's because of the people who are doing the programming and inputting the data. If those people who have primarily been one persuasion or one gender or one ethnicity, that's going to be reflected in how those machines learn. So then we're mad at the artificial intelligence that comes from the machines that just learn from the data inputs that were in there, and then that machine tells artificial intelligence, here's the predictive analytics of what potentially could happen. Well, those outputs of those mechanisms from the inputs are just a reflection of who put the information in, where the data came from. So if we want to change the paradigm of all the things that we do face, who is putting in the data? So if we want more gender, to reflect more women in the algorithms and women in the machine learning and the outputs and the predictive analytics, then we need more women on the engineering and the data science and on the econ side of the inputs. If we want more people, we think that this is what I'm trying to tell people, we're in an ethics session. The biggest challenge now for artificial intelligence and machine learning around the world is the ethics and the laws to govern it. and it's growing, it's exploding all over the world. In China, and a lot of these places, people are trying to, who's the ethics police for this machine learning? Who's going to manage? Who's putting what in? They could put whatever they want in, but the ethics police don't know anything about machine learning or not experts. So how will they be able to tell within this code base that this was set up this way or this was set up that way? Well, this is what people don't recognize. You can have two people, two males or two females. We're all going to start making different options. One's going to go left, one's going to right when you start coding, because we have options. But the more diverse your people are at work, the more people you have, the more you can challenge that mindset, because somebody's going to hold somebody accountable when you're writing the code, when you're doing the code reviews, when you look at the low-level designs and the high-level designs. But what is the diversity of the people that are coming in? Because I think the great equalizer is accountability by having diverse people engaging. Because when you look at a code base is not color.
Ones and zeros.
Ones and zeros. So you want what better ones and zeros? Diversify the people that are putting it in, because I think that's the great equalizer.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so, I'm going to dig here a little bit.
Go ahead.
At most companies I've worked at, including Google, when I walk the halls, I don't see people that look like me. When I go get lunch, I see people that look like me. When they're cleaning the bathrooms and they're cleaning all the spots, I see people that look like me. And I spent much of my career spending a lot of quality time with the people that I connected with, and sometimes those were the folks. Yeah. What I learned as I grew in my career and became more senior, I became much more comfortable being authentic. And I know I spent years trying to not wear my beard and try to always have a clean shape up and to try to always have waves going on my head, and this is a personal thing. When I started keeping it real, especially as I became more senior, I got invited to way more rooms of authority and way more opportunities to influence the culture.
Why is that?
Because they need us. They want us. They don't want me showing up like Carlton Banks.
Right.
They hired me because I'm from Washington, D.C., right? And if I bring Robert Duhart into the room, I make a difference with Doug McMillan. Yeah. But if Carlton Banks shows up, what am I really making an impact? And I'm not trying to denigrate the stereotype. I'm saying I wish I had started being more real, younger. I can be professional, I can execute. Now there's danger, and all of us will tell you, there are times where keeping it real can go wrong. You do not keep it real in the boardroom. That is not where you keep it real.
I was about to challenge that point. I think.
But there is a space for authenticity. And I think we as black people, especially in the wake of George Floyd, you see a lot of people that are seeking change, and they get that from authenticity. Yeah. I wish I had been authentic sooner.
And if I can add to that, I'm a VP of Technology, VP of Development Services at Manulife. Yeah. I got that role, I think, when I look back and I reflect, because I stepped up and I said, hey, the black experience at Manulife is this. And I was very open and very honest about what we were feeling, what we were not seeing when we looked up. And they listened. I'll give Manulife, John Hancock, a lot of credit. They listened. And I think just because I stepped up and I stepped out of my skin, like I tell people a lot of times, for most of my career, I put on a different skin to go to work. Yes. That's how I dealt with the microaggressions and the racism and all the comments, is I put on that skin.
Can I challenge some of that?
Sure.
I mean, not challenge it, but
challenge it if you need to.
No, I don't. Not that I need to, but I think, like, I struggle with the authentic self as almost as if it's like the stereotype. So what does that mean, right? Because it probably means very different things for all of us.
It could be a generational.
Right? We're not a monolith.
And keeping it 100 and those phrases.
Oh yeah. Speak on it.
Because and this is what I when I mentor folks, I ask them this question.
That's real.
Do you speak to your grandmother the same way you speak to your friends? The answer is no. Are you not authentic? Are you not 100%?
That's a great point.
Corporations have a culture.
It's true.
Right? And so And it's not necessarily white or black culture. There's a corporate culture.
Right.
All right. I worked at IBM. There's an engineering culture there. People want to know you because of what you've done, the work you've done.
Your technical work.
When I get to Fidelity, it's not. It's a relationship-driven culture. So now it's more about, not that you don't have to know what it is you're doing, but it's more about relationships, right? People aren't clamoring around you because you just got this patent or built this really cool thing. So learn the culture, and I'm hesitating to say adapt, but coexist, create a synergy with that culture, right? That doesn't violate you, right? There are lines, there are things that right? I'm sure we all establish, I will not cross.
I think that's a valid point.
It is.
But also thinking about what Daryl said around who builds the system. The builders of the system will have inherent biases, and therefore that system will have inherent biases, right? So we have to be very careful. The corporate structure was designed by someone. It was built by someone. So when we go there, we talk the way that those people talk because that's the system that was existing. So we have to be careful about what I think is maybe assimilating into certain cultures and have to decide, to your point, what's comfortable of what do we adopt and what do we disrupt? Because not everything in the corporate system is necessarily set up for us to succeed, right? But this is a topic we can unpack for much more time, but we need to continue on. So thinking about DEI and how do we get more folks in tech, and also like a lot of to your point, George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd was certainly a tipping point in a lot of ways where we see the societal winds have now trended towards more corporate social responsibility, to more DEI, to these big funds earmarking accelerator programs for black businesses. But much of the emphasis on DEI could be sometimes for women or for black women, which is great. We see these dollars going, but what is happening or not happening from your perspective with DEI? Is it working? Are we getting the results? Why or why not?
Well, I don't know about anybody else, and I get your point too around that. What your point was earlier around authenticity, I really do, because it speaks to me in this way. I think we have to be much more self-aware. And when we're putting on masks and we're taking off masks. Right. Because if we're all honest, we take on and put on masks when we walk in our homes to deal with our families and when we walk out. Right. We put on one mask to deal with the kids, we deal one mask when we deal with the spouse. Yeah. So we have to be careful, be self-aware, or know thyself, which is what that means. Is know thyself, and when we are putting on masks to cope, and we're putting on masks to acculturate or simulate in a certain culture to that point. But when I look at what you're referring to, because when we look at disproportionately minority-owned businesses over the last 2 years have been shuttered or closed down at 4 to 5 times the rate of non-minority businesses. And having had a certified business, minority-owned business, I'm a veteran. We're minority-owned and certified through MNSDC, so I hurt when I see our businesses close. So when I look at DE&I or ID&E or ESP or any of the, and I'm speaking next week at another conference about this, they asked me to talk a little bit about this. One of the things I would ask us to do is be careful not to understand the buying power of our own race.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that we have an unrealistic expectations for others to support us in DE&I or ID&E efforts when we don't do as much as we can to support one another. And so I would say, let's turn our microaggressions, our micro frustrations. Where are you spending your money? Because when you look at it, we are monolithic in our spending behavior. We buy by brand. We are the most loyal brand culture of any race. If we love a brand, we stick with it. Like you can go look up the studies. I'm gonna call some of the companies. But when our families, our grandmothers or great grandmothers bought a brand, we stick with it. But what we don't do enough of, and I wish we would do this as we look at DE&I, how do we apply it? So as a minority-owned business, we had our own minority supplier program. We bought diverse first, and we didn't have no money. But we still had a minority-owned, African-American marketing firm. We had a janitorial source. We couldn't pay some of them sometimes. But we tried our best because when guess what got us deals at McDonald's and Coca-Cola? Because when we came, we said, we're not only a minority-owned business, but let me show you the minority-owned businesses that by doing business with us, every dollar you spend with us, here's how 50% of our employee base is diverse. We spend 60% of our revenue with minority-owned businesses. That's how we can change the world, by starting with us. And if we start taking advantage of showing other people the way by supporting us, by being here, because it's great to buy a corporate table, but are the CEOs and the heads of those C-suite people sitting in that room over there where the table is being purchased? Because if we're not modeling the way, how can we expect others to appreciate D&I or ID&E if we're not loyal to our own businesses? Black Wall Street was successful for a reason. And we have many, many small Black Wall Streets today. They're just disparate in over places, and they're not all on one street. But how many of us support the minorities? And how many of us tip the Uber driver? That's a business. That's a small business. How many of us to tip in the DoorDash? Those are all minority-owned businesses that we need to care about and support. Go to Amazon.com/black businesses and support those Black-owned businesses so you can see their certificates. That's how we change the world, because we spend $8 trillion a year as a group. And
Rob,
where do we spend it?
Rob, what's your take? I see you're on the tip of your seat here.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut off. I apologize, brother. Accountability. So, right, we all, vice presidents, we've achieved quite well in our careers. You get to a place where, you can kind of call shots, right? So if I'm in a position where I need to hire 500 people, I can say, I might not say this publicly, but I might say I am going to hire a certain number of people that look a certain way, that are women, that are transgender, right? That are in these, maybe spaces that are underrepresented. I think in DEI, one of the challenges is we as a group of people find so much, we're trying to survive in corporate America versus trying to hold corporate America accountable. And I think there's a time for us to start stepping up and standing up and using the power that we have to make a difference. Now, we don't want to be stupid. We have to understand our corporate culture. We don't want you being unsuccessful.
Right.
You have to become the vice president or the senior vice president or the executive vice president. But when you get there, it's game time. And it's time to start holding people accountable. And I've had senior executives ask me that question. What does it mean for me to be accountable for the commitment that I made 2 years ago?
Hey, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I do. So you guys both said accountable and power. And so to me, when you're in these positions, like you said, you're a VP, you now have the ability to affect policy in a corporation. Because when you affect the policies, then it changes the culture.
It does.
Right? And so you write into the policies, you have to have certain metrics for Black employment, or like all those things. So that's, to answer your question about
Results.
This is it. Affect
Metrics.
the policies, the metrics.
Yeah,
right?
numbers.
You've got to hit that. So that's, and then your personal power. So like everybody in this room has power.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
and
true.
so when you go back to the work and if you're a male manager, if you're a lower manager, you have the ability to make the decision to hire somebody that looks like you.
That's true.
Right? Don't be afraid. And I think that's what people are afraid. I found this a lot. It's like,
Yes.
once you get there, you're afraid and you don't want to be seen as hanging out with other Black people and hiring other Black people.
Why do you always hire Black people?
From the time.
But I never got that when I hired Indian people.
No, it was exactly it.
Nobody had a question.
Right. So don't be afraid. Make that decision to say, bring somebody. And I think his name was Will Felder from yesterday. He said, I may be saying it wrong, but he said, as you rise, lift somebody up. Right? And so that just resonated with me so much.
So what resources are needed to forge stronger pipelines into tech? Is it training? Is it certifications? Is it better recruiting at HBCUs? What do you guys see and what are you doing to help bring those people in tangibly?
So I'm going to connect to the last question and then jump into that.
Okay.
So I was brought into Fidelity by a Black executive. And we brought other, people of color in, honoring, right, that they're equally as talented. As recently, even like last year, well, this year even, searching for people of color, women, it is challenging. There aren't, there, right?
The talent pool is
The
smaller.
talent pool is small.
Okay.
So what do you need for resources? I talked about the bar of entry for a motivated individual has dropped dramatically. So I think we talk about it's the schools are getting into school. Realize this about tech, why I'm saying it's so amazing. You can have no degree, and the path for no degree is to go to Google Hub, find a project,
Yes.
contribute to that project.
Yes.
Start by just helping with documentation, right? As you build a skill to then develop and then contribute to that product. It monitors you and will show a prospective customer, right, company, that what your development history is, right? They can actually look at your code.
Yeah.
So now I don't have to, interview you and interpret. I can look at your logic, your thinking,
can see your
and what you're
code.
doing.
Yeah.
And many people get hired just from that,
Yes.
right? So again, we're back to your own initiative to invest your time and talent into what you believe may impact your future, right? So there's tremendous opportunity, and I struggle too to figure out how to reach a up and coming group of people of color,
Right.
and just expose that fact to them.
Right, because that's a huge element to that, right? It's easy to say the initiative, which is a large factor, but it has to be, we think about the masses, because everyone in here can say we're the talented 10, right?
Yeah.
So W.B. Du Bois said that, right? We're going to be fine. We're going to eat good. We're going to have healthy lives. We're going to have somewhere to live. But the other 90% of our community is going to struggle. And so we have to make sure that we are sending the elevator down and we are thinking intentionally about how we're creating more awareness for that group. How are we sending the line back, providing education and training for that group? And so that's the question. I think there is a level of initiative, but what are the programs? What are the resources?
So at Fidelity, there's Fidelity Made. So that program seeks to take folks that are not in tech and first enter them through a business analyst role, right? And a business process management role. So effectively all analyst roles, right? Scrum masters. And so that allows you to sort of come in and then again, through your own initiative, branch off from there. Listening to some of the alumni out of that program, it's an amazing program. The through line for all of the folks that have gone through that is this self-motivation, this interest they had. And while they went through that program, they were taking classes on their own outside and so on and so forth, right? That was the most consistent as I listened to that group. So, Wendy John's here. We Fidelity, that is, I think is doing a tremendous job of trying to create the opportunity. How do we get people to, recognize this truly is an opportunity for them? That's my big struggle.
Yeah. Well, I just speak a little bit of AWS. I'm really proud of AWS and Amazon and what they do in providing free courses and training. If they give millions of hours away every year for people to start. But I'd like to also see for HBCUs, I'd like to see events like this. And I don't know if anybody remembers, well, when I was in the HBCU, air traffic controllers were in a dire need in the early 80s, and they went around, right? They went around and said, "Hey, we need African." As an African American, like air traffic control. I ain't never heard of African.
Both my college roommates went into air traffic control.
They made a huge effort, Johnny, just invest. I mean, they came around to the schools. They ran seminars. They did all kind of cool things like that. I would like for us to do more events like this at HBCUs, because I think it's not just about engineering. I think people hear about engineering and development, and it can be overwhelming.
Right.
But when you break it all down, you have business analysts, business liaison, you have project managers, tech project managers, PMTs, TMPs, program managers, technical program managers, product managers, technical product managers, and sometimes people hear is you got to jump all the way to coding.
Right.
That may not be your skill set.
That's
You may-
important to know because
That's a
not
huge
every
point.
role in tech is a coding
huge point.
engineer.
Right,
There's a
right.
lot of roles
They make a lot of money.
They
make a lot of money that don't require you to
Very
code
important.
physically.
My technical product managers make as much as my engineers.
Right. Yep.
Because they understand how to read code or how to break down user cases. Because I'm going to tell you something, one of the biggest opportunities in the future, if you don't hear this, you need to make sure you're telling people about it and read about it. It's not just engineering hard coding. The biggest opportunity is the person in between the hard coding person and the business person.
Yes.
The business has no idea about coding, and that person in the middle now is making $400,000 to $500,000 a year, being a business use case, breaking down use cases. What do you want Johnny to do? What do you want Johnny to do? Talk to me. I'll break down the design. I'll break it all down for you. And then Johnny just gets to look at here's the kit. Here's the business need. Here's the low-level design. Let's work on it. And that project manager or technical product manager or technical product manager, they're making $300,000 and $400,000 a year right now. You can't find them. That's
Right. Yep.
This is true.
Yes.
So just to go back to your question a little bit, because there's so much to say. Just trying to get it all
Yes,
out.
right.
But the one thing that I wanted
Pick
to
and
share is, and I'm really proud of Manulife for doing this. You said where to find people or where to go. Like join groups. So the groups, and don't be afraid of joining Black groups. So there's a group called Black Professional Technology Network, and I don't know if many people know about that.
Right.
We are now Manulife now has a partnership with them, and that is a group of North American technology people, 50,000 strong. That is a pipeline to organizations. So you partner with them, and then they provide you a pipeline of Black technology professionals. So that's a way of getting into tech. And I loved just the stories about what you just said, because I know when I was in my SAP days, they would take people from finance, from procurement, don't know anything about SAP, nothing,
Right.
and train them.
Right.
Because it's easier to train you on SAP than it is for you to understand the debits and credits and all that sort of stuff on the financial system.
Know the
right?
business,
So
yeah.
that's the way to get into tech is by those BA roles and those product manager roles is to do that.
And that's interesting too, because I think we can highlight the fact that there's project managers, there's program managers, there's all these managers and other roles in tech that don't require you to code, that can make a lot of money, high income generating roles. And wherever you are in your career right now, you might be like, well, why can't that be me, right? I want to now transition.
Sure.
So I want to provide a little context for those who are maybe the mid-careerists who are looking to transition. And I know that as a Black man, my personal experience has been frustrating sometimes in the workforce, where I get to a point where I'm like, F you, you're cool, I'm out. You know what I'm saying? And I started entrepreneurship because of what I call an entrepreneurial seizure, where I just wanted to do my own thing. I needed autonomy that bad. Yeah. It's not the most practical or responsible way, right? So how do you guys define the role of like networking and mentorship in making that transition? And how does someone know when it is the right time for them to leave a job and pursue the next opportunity?
So I'll start because I'd like to share a tool that I want to leave folks with to self-evaluate, and it's part of this as well. Think and work to complete your assignment. That's you. Think and work to help your team. Think and work to help your division, your organization, and think across your company. So those 4 sections, if you view your work, your contribution to whatever it is you're doing, an individual contributor that is looking to progress but sees himself only completing the work to think and work in my own assignments, won't ever move, right? Won't ever have the opportunity to move. So as you move up in your career, what you should be seeing is that you're thinking and working to aid your organization, aid the company, that your efforts have shifted down. Right? So you can self-assess at the end of the year and use that tool I use it for evaluating people to make a determination as to whether they're ready to make that move.
So I can take one more response to this question, then I have another question for more like the C-suite and senior executives, and then we're going to open up for questions. Okay, so one more response to this.
Go, Johnny, go.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
go, Johnny. Yeah, I got this. Mentor, champion, sponsor.
Talk about it.
Everybody in this room, if you're a professional, it doesn't matter what layer you are in the organization, you need to have all three.
Yeah.
That is how doors open. That is who
Mentor,
decides who
champion,
gets fired,
sponsor.
or gets hired, or gets promoted.
So what's the difference between a
champion,
mentor,
sponsor.
champion, and sponsor?
Oh, that's a
really quick.
great question.
By
That's a great
definition.
question.
And
Great
I'll
question.
get some help from the room, but
Yeah.
I'll start. Mentor, that's somebody who teaches you, helps you do your day-to-day job. Right? It's someone who talks to you about challenges you may be having, on a day-to-day basis. Not your boss, not your boss's boss, not someone who makes decisions on who's getting hired. That's a peer, right? Who can work with you, maybe slightly above, but more your level.
Okay.
A
Champion.
sponsor,
Or sponsor.
yeah. A sponsor is somebody who says, "What about Johnny?"
Yeah.
When there's opportunities being
That's the big one.
circulated,
That's a big one.
That's the big one.
years and months in advance, quarters in advance.
Someone who's mentioning your name in rooms you haven't entered into.
Correct.
Exactly.
That nobody knows you.
Because half of us aren't in all the rooms. None of us are in all of the rooms.
Right.
And then a champion is the person who goes to bat for you and says, "This is why Johnny needs to do this role. I saw Johnny do this, and this, and you will lose if you don't have Johnny doing this."
Wonderful. Hope you all took notes on that piece. And I have one last question before we open up for Q&A. It's really thinking about aspiring senior executives and senior leadership. As you guys have ascended to those roles, I think this is appropriate. I think being black in America, and being black in tech, I should say, is a microcosm of being black in America. So it takes a certain level of mental and emotional toughness to reside there. So the question that I have is, what is the typical profile of a senior executive at a tech company, and should black men subscribe to that or redefine it?
Well, I'll answer it this way. Someone asked me, said, a lot of African Americans are upset because they don't get funding when they go and pitch for a startup. And they feel like this is the thing that is holding them back. And I say to them, then they're not entrepreneurial. And the guy in the podcast took a step back and said, "What do you mean?" Because an entrepreneur fights through every obstacle possible to win. 50, 100 disconnects, or 50 disappointments, or this deck is bad, they fight through it. So I will say the same thing about someone who, African American who wants to be in tech. You will never let anything get in the way if this is what you want to do. And I am a living example of it. I never took a computer course. I went to a small HBC. I went to school for education. I had no idea I'd be doing this. And I have some of the smartest and brightest people working with me, but it took humility and being vulnerable and knowing myself and understanding that I needed to have smart people around me, and I was willing to listen. And so that for me was the margin of difference. And I didn't, and I'm not stopping fighting for it every day. Even as I sit here today, I'm fighting for it every day, and I will never stop.
Let's give a round of applause for our panelists. We'll open up for questions. Thank you guys for your candid responses. I know I asked some tough questions, but
Yeah, you did.
they're probably
It was worth it, though.
Yeah, it was good.
It was worth it.
that's why they put me here. So we'll open up for questions. My man, please just say your name, your title, and your question, please.
Yeah, Beza, a cybersecurity guy at Dell. Of course, exciting issues you talked about, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Besides the biased HR folks and business unit leaders, bias is baked in the tools like applicant tracking system to drive homogeneous workforce, keep the black workforce pool small, and implement end-to-end discrimination. So the two questions that I have for you is that just as much as you review software, as much as you review code, will there be any possibilities that you'll be empowered to review software algorithm if bias is encoded or embedded within this? The second question will be, a lot of algorithm is built with some kind of default variables. And will you be in a possible situation where instead of those default configurations are reflecting 80% of the majority who don't look like us, probably reflecting you, whereby the traits you're going to include what is particular to the minority culture and traits, not looking for a university from Ivy League, not 3 certifications, excluding if you have a gap in employment, all kinds of the Black community culture. So when will that change happen from the software point of view? As you said, we have to take advantage of the artificial intelligence and machine learning. So as much as it has to be gravitational for us, the adversity is probably also using to counter for counter situation, to counter that situation. So your point.
I'll take a first shot. So I think it's Dr. Gabriel was Google, right? Yeah. Famous before that, but became notorious. Famous after that. So she's identified that, right? Did the research and identified this issue of bias. Yeah. And earlier you heard. So I think the connection there is diversity for me in that space is the more diverse folks in the field,
right? Correct.
Identifying the bias.
Yes.
Then those systems change. Because they're trained, right? You put in data, you take 10% out, you train it on that percent, and then you put the unknown data in. That's the training process.
That's right.
And so there are lots of ways that some of it isn't even malicious, right? The data just coming in is just
some of
bias.
unconscious bias,
Right.
because if it's coming from a certain part of the country or
Part
the
of the country,
world,
right,
or
right.
even outside the U.S., there's just
there's baked in
gaps.
bias.
Yeah.
But one has to be trained, right, in the field
to recognize.
To
recognize
and
it.
to change it.
to change it, right? So we don't blame the system. So the more diverse we get
Correct.
in the population,
Correct.
then there are folks with an interest, with a passion for identifying and making sure that they're not getting the wrong information.
Good question, good answer.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
All right. So, so my name is John Matthews. I'm in the fintech and metaverse and extended reality space. I wrote my question down so I don't forget it, so I don't get it wrong. And Johnny, you actually asked the question, but I just wanted to hear it a little bit more. So how do I, as a Black male tech founder, access capital when many of those George Floyd or guilt funds, angels and VCs are targeting Black females-led founders, which deservingly so as well, right? Because they hit 2 minority checkpoints. And also, I would like to connect with Hayden because you mentioned about that professional tech group.
Yes.
So I would like to talk to you maybe afterwards.
Definitely.
Good question.
Well, I'll tell you, having gone through many of those conversations, I'll be very honest with you. Yes, it is difficult. The rounds and rounds of money that we were denied and fighting through every day was tough. And to be honest, at the day we sold our company, we didn't have any money in the bank. Because the due diligence cost us. And then we had to pay the folks who managed the due diligence that we didn't have to, who took all of the money for most of themselves, right? So what I have found, and the best advice I can give people, the longer that you can have friends and family invest is the best model possible. And then from there, if you're in a position not to take cash from your company, even when you get investments, and you let it sit into account. Because what we did, when I got our first $2 million check, I put it into a mutual fund. And we gave nobody raises. We still fought through. We got through a very, very tough period, even with money in the bank, to actually expand and grow. But I will tell you, Silicon Valley Bank was good to us. Techstars was good to us, because they did have funds that mandated that they had to have certain minorities. But I will tell you, there's a lot of money out there. I know Saks and some of these other big funds have set Bank of America. We have a $150 million Black accelerator at Amazon. Yeah. So there is money out there, but I tell you, you have to dig, and you have to be able to make it through all of the meetings to get through them. And I will tell you, but there is money out there.
And alternatively, if you're looking for some other sources of funding, there's always crowdsourcing, things
Mezzanine
like
fund?
Kickstarter.
Yeah.
There's always accelerators.
Yeah.
There's pitch competitions. There's of course micro loans that you can take debt capital and not have to trade equity in your company. So I'm a huge proponent of just getting traction for your business so that you have the leverage and that companies money is thrown at you versus you looking for money to run your business. So that might not be the perfect answer, but there's always other ways to get to the bag.
And make sure you set up your contracts right, because reoccurring revenue is the way that's what everybody's. Sure. If it's not reoccurring revenue, it's not services. Right, people don't understand. When you come in, services is dead. If you have reoccurring revenue that you are having from an ARR perspective, that's what people listen to when they invest. But Techstars has got a great fund.
Build relationships. Yeah. I talk to VCs all the time. They're like, tell me who's next. Tell me who I should talk to in the Black community.
So after the panel, come up and connect. Yeah. We have time for about
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. 2 more questions. You got to make them quick, and then we got to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, afternoon. My name is Jerry Kays, engineer at NASA. And brother, I feel you. I'm back there, and I want to say it because I think a lot of times when we get on panels like this, I'm going to be honest. Like, when we talk about the trenches and the mud, I'm that typical engineer that went the traditional science identity from concept to PhD. The reality is the country can't depend on people that do what I do. The underrepresentation of women, Latinos, and African Americans is still low. And so really the reality is it's the culture within African Americans. We don't talk about it. I mean, as much as I want to get little Dante to, and Dominique and STEM, this shit is hard. I mean, it's challenging. To put something in space, there's no answer in the back of the book. And I think in terms of critique and accountability, I think we're building too much of a participation culture around tech versus saying science to technology is about producing. And I'm seeing one side of people here, like me, and another side of people over here. But we got to figure out a way to come together and talk about, what it is we know is our weaknesses.
Yo, Johnny.
That was a statement, but I appreciate that statement.
Can I hit that, Johnny, though? Because you asked a question earlier, what differentiates executives?
Yes.
Executives deliver. They may deliver the wrong way. Like good executives serve and deliver, but executives deliver, right? And so I think all of us at some point have been held to that standard. Yeah. So you're not wrong. You don't get a participation trophy as an executive. If you don't deliver, you're out the door. And so we absolutely have to have accountability for delivery. But so many Black people, brown people, people that I know, y'all deliver, but you're not getting the benefits. How do we make that a reality?
Good question. Last question, then we wrap this thing up. Mr. Joe.
How you guys doing? My name is Gerald Grant III. Tying it into economic empowerment a little bit, because that's the space that I'm in. You guys talked a little bit about the not easy, but ways to get into the industry, right? So what kind of conversation, especially when we look at the student loan crisis in our country, what is your advice to our younger generation who want to get in tech and they may not have the funds to go to school and have to take on student loans, but then you guys are talking about all of these untraditional, not necessarily degree-driven jobs. What is your advice for them? Do you still see the need for that college degree in this space, or do you tell them, hey, just go do it?
I'm gonna tell you, you won't need a college degree in this space. And you see Elon Musk and a lot of people are saying it now. The college degree is not required. Some of my best people don't have a college degree. And there are so many avenues from AWS gives away, again, seriously, you can go through cloud practitioner, you can be an architectural engineer, you can go, all those classes are free. I'm on the board for Proscolas, which provides free training and targets minorities, and I'm a big advocate for Proscolas because I think that's an opportunity for a non-traditional route for people that have not had the access. But again, there's nothing going to replace a passion and desire, though. Because I've also seen people go through these programs and do nothing. I've seen people sign up for classes and never attend, and they're free. Right. So, and I've been in there, so I know that what you cannot give people is a burning passion and desire if it is not there. And I think that's one of the things we cannot miss and confuse. If you don't have a passion, if you don't have a desire, I don't care if it's if it were that easy, there'd be more doctors. You know, if it was that easy, 50% of the teachers got out of the workforce this year. 50% of the teachers got out of the workforce this year. And guess what? A lot of them failed with trying to make the transitions to technology because they thought it would be easier. And so what do we have to, you can put it in front of someone. You can make it free. You can have someone stand over them, but it takes them to have the initiative to get through it.
Quite certainly, the value of higher education is a hotly debated topic.
Yeah, right.
And with that said, Google does have a suite of certifications that it accepts as criteria for employment.
Yeah.
So things around coding, project management, what have you. I recommend you check out google.grow, and you can find all of the products and services that help you get certified and qualify for a role at Google. I'm also a digital coach here in DC, so I provide free workshops and trainings for small business owners and professionals to grow their businesses and their brands online. So highly recommend you check that out. Lastly, remember, being a Black leader in corporate is a privilege and a responsibility.
Yeah.
Supporting the Black community means buying Black first, and mentorship means lifting as you climb and networking across. And if they ask you why, the answer is that we are the leaders of right now. I'm Johnny Bailey, and thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference, you all.
Hey, you guys, you gotta get a picture together. You gotta get a picture together.
Hey, you got.
Oh.